You're right, there was a great example of representation, but unfortunately, out there in the mainstream, in television, theatre and on the internet, there are all too many instances of the hearing community using sign language and deaf culture inappropriately. The term many use for this is cultural appropriation.
Now that concept has been widely discussed within the deaf community in America, but not here in the UK.
That's why we've invited our two guests who have been discussing this issue, Jephta and Paddy. Hello there. So, can you give a definition of cultural appropriation? What does it mean exactly?
Cultural appropriation is linked to how people, despite having their own culture, choose to use another culture. For example, the British deaf community has a culture that is intrinsically linked to BSL. But sometimes a hearing person takes an interest in BSL and then exploits it and uses it for personal gain to feel good. Or maybe they set up classes and start selling sign language as a commodity and capitalizing on BSL for themselves. They're separating the language from its culture and taking something that doesn't belong to them. So it's things like that.
So that's your understanding of it. What's your definition, Paddy?
Well, it's problematic because we are the minority. And when you have a minority group side by side with a majority that is taking from it constantly, then it becomes an issue. Whereas if we're both from a majority, say you're English and I'm French, if I take something from you, it's not contentious because we're equals. However, when the minority is oppressed, it has no power to respond and defend itself. And that's it.
So what about when hearing individuals use sign language, fully aware that it will draw attention, but then redirect the focus to the deaf community to further people's understanding? Is that still cultural appropriation?
From that description, if, say, like at Glastonbury they're signing, I think that's okay, as long as they're acknowledging that sign language they're using belongs to the deaf community, and they're giving credit to the community. But if sign language is being used to put themselves at the forefront, and they're learning the language because they are nice, or they are a saviour and are admired for helping the deaf community, then that's not okay. And if that individual is making money from this idea that the majority needs to learn sign language so that they can also help the deaf community, then that message can be a bit dangerous. The hearing majority have a privilege. So for example, when hearing individuals use sign language publicly for their own purposes, then a hearing majority thinks it's simply a language with nothing else to it. So other hearing people learn to sign and create videos and vlogs about it. But when deaf people call them out, they are discriminated against, ignored and maligned, plus their accusations of privilege are denied. Being hearing affords you the access to networks and a platform to be heard.
Okay.
Right.
So you're talking about privilege?
Yes.
You're talking about hearing privilege, but there's also hard of hearing privilege. Those who have English have privilege. Those who have speech have privilege.
Yes.
Those who act on those privileges to further themselves, leaving the deaf community behind, taking sign language for themselves, those individuals who can speak can have a relationship with the hearing majority and go on to get the better jobs.
Exactly that.
And that's the issue.
Okay, so what about something that's very popular now on social media, which is sign song?
Right.
That's popular with both hearing and deaf audiences alike.
Well, I feel that sign songs by hearing people who are not fluent, say those at level 1, level 2, they've learned sign vocabulary, but, well, for example, it's like a hearing person with no vocal training, so has a really awful singing voice. The results are similar.
Carry on.
If students are learning BSL and posting videos but say, please don't try and copy my signs, this is just a learning process, then I don't have a problem with that, because they're learning a new language, just using songs to try and pin their new sign vocabulary onto.
But some are making money from teaching sign language. That's underhand. Now, baby sign. That's a prime example of appropriation. It's theft. They should be giving the deaf community credit. It should be deaf game.
So my question is, how do we solve this problem?
To be honest, we need to take responsibility here. Deaf people should be calling it out. America is a perfect example of a galvanized community that's highlighting the problem. The hearing community is learning. We need to do the same here, to explain that BSL is more than just a language. It's tied to a deep cultural experience.
It's such a powerful term, cultural appropriation. It has real impact.
This cultural appropriation has been a wake-up call for the deaf community. And via social media, deaf people are making a stand to reclaim their language from the naive hearing people's hands, because they're realising that their language is being abused. This concept, like you said, can empower deaf people to say to the hearing people, you can learn sign, that's not the problem, but be mindful of how you use it. It's not for monetary gain, or fame, or attention, to set yourself up as a saviour.
It's a really complex topic,
You're right.
but we have to stop our discussion there. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thanks.